Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Alexander from the IBM reminding you to keep calm and perform magic. Welcome back to the Jam Session Live. This is going to be special. Our next speaker is a regular at SME Talk Magic. He's a creator of magic, the Wiz Kote, well known, a motivational magician, longtime speaker and coach, and he's here to share some much needed tips and tricks of the trade. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Steve Hart.
Hi everybody. So, the question is, maybe why is it that they have asked me to do this? Well, one thing is I created this workbook years ago for magicians on how they can market themselves better. And I have to say, I've been blessed. I've been doing this for a living for over 30 years, and I made a lot of money. I've made a little bit of money, and I'm going to share with you the strategy that I use to make a lot of money at doing this. That's the beautiful thing about performing magic is you get to basically your own boss, and you get to create whatever it is you want. So they've asked me to do this program, and the reason why they've asked me to do it is probably because I've been able to make a good living at it, and I will share with you some of the numbers of what I was able to do and how I was able to do that. But the most important thing about this is the strategy that we're using. Now, I'm assuming, the way I understand it, this workbook is going to be available to you online. And so there are 16 pages in here, and it is actually a workbook that you actually can download, and you can use it to figure out what your strategy is going to be and how you're going to go about this. So here's the truth. Years ago, I saw several of my magician friends. If you know anything about my history, I used to work at a place called Illusions on the north side of Indianapolis. It was a magic nightclub restaurant, and I was one of the original staff members, and I was there for 14 years. And we had numerous talent come through Illusions, and I saw magicians who were making an okay living at it, but were outstanding magicians. They were better magicians than me, and yet I was making more money and keeping busier than they were, and it was partly because of the way I positioned myself in the markets. They were unable to do so. So that's the reason why I created this program, is because there are a lot of magicians who fail to get the bookings that they want, and the reason have on how to market themselves. So yeah, they have a business card, they have a website, and they can give a good talk, but it goes beyond that. You really have to position yourself, and I keep pointing to your brain because this is where it all begins. Now, let me explain to you a little bit about what position marketing is. It's very, very simple, and that is, I'm going to ask you the question. Tell me, what is your favorite restaurant? Okay, all right, you got one? Okay, now give me a second one, another restaurant you like to go to. Maybe a third one? Yeah, maybe a fourth one. Now, you notice when you went down the list, it got a little more difficult to come up with the fourth one, to think of someone who you really, and you can do the same thing with any product, or like a radio show. It could be a toothpaste. It could be whatever products that's out there, soup, TV show, whatever it may be, which airline you're going to use, what magazines you're going to read. But here's the deal. These products, these services have spent a lot of money to position themselves in your mind to be the number one, for you to purchase their product. So when you think of a bookstore, you automatically think of that particular one. Or if you think of a particular toothpaste, you think of that one. So they spent, and one of the more popular ones that we hear about are sodas, pop sodas, Coca-Cola and Pepsi have fought it out, and then you got all the other products. And the point is they spend a lot of money to get in that position. So the strategy is, when people think of entertainment, do they think of you? Do they think of you? When they think of a magician, do they think of you? Now, I don't know what your demographics is or where you live, but it's going to be important that you know how to position yourself in your locality and in your markets. So they think of you as first, as number one. Now, you may not be number one, you may not be number two, and we're going to talk about that too in just a little bit. But we're going to talk a little bit now, if you go through the workbook with me here, about your strategic approach. So basically what it is, everything you're doing in your marketing is going to be to position yourself to be number one in people's minds when it comes to entertainment, whatever market you want to go into, birthday parties, trade shows. They're going to say, we got to get that guy, we got to get that magician. So most magicians spend a lot of money, a lot of time on their website, their business card. Back in my day, it was the yellow pages. You had to have a yellow page ad. It was really interesting, that the contrast between those days till today. But all of it was about, once again, position yourself in people's minds. So people get all the material around and a video. I forgot to mention the video. I mean, in my opinion, it's very important today to especially have a video so that people can see how you perform or see you live. That's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed working at a restaurant, is because people, I would say, come out and see me perform. And at Illusions we worked at, we not only did magic at the table up close, but we had a stage show too. So that was really unique in its day, and we had a lot of magic came out of that place. Showcase yourself in any way you can, position yourself in that showcase. Now, in your marketing material on your website, and I strongly encourage you to, it's okay to have a business card, but create a business card that takes them to your website, because in your website you can change it, put a lot of information on there and your videos on there. My theory is basically to get them to make sure to see my video. If they see my video, see me perform, usually I get the booking. Now, one of the things you want to talk about are the benefits of what they get. There's a difference between benefits and features. And if you don't know the difference, I strongly encourage you to listen closely to what I'm saying. Benefits are what they get out of your performance. The features are maybe the fact of what type of magic you do, whether or not you include certain livestock in your show, or do you do comedy, do you work for adults or children's program? Those are some of the featured parts of you. But the benefit of what they get is most important. So that is, what do they get out of the show? Now, what I'm going to ask you is this question. When they book you, what are they really wanting? Think about it. What are they really wanting from you? Now, over the past 15 years since I wrote this workbook, it's now become more popular, more prevalent that magicians are catching on. The answer to the question is, they're looking for entertainment that gives them an experience that they're not used to having. And out of that experience, creating memories, happy memories of an event or whatever it is that they're celebrating. I'm going to tell you, if you're not talking about what you give them and creating memories, you're missing the boat. So that's one important thing for you to know about position yourself. When you position yourself, make sure you're talking about the benefits of what they get. Now I'm going to talk about the big obstacle. What is your biggest obstacle that's keeping you from getting the shows you want? What is the biggest obstacle of you being in a position, number one position in your market for whatever demographics or whatever type of show you're performing? What is it? What's the obstacle? Do you know what it is? It's you. It's your own mind. Now you may say to me, "Oh no, Steve, I know I'm the best. I'm good at what I do. I do so many shows a week, and whatever, I make this kind of money." That's fine. If you are, then that's a good sign. But don't fool yourself. If you're not really in the number one position in your mind, and you want to be, you're going to have to make some adjustments in your mind. You have to see yourself and live your life as though you are in the number one position. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, how do I get to that? How do I get to that position if I've got people ahead of me in the market? Well, there's a secret to that, Ed, and that is you become specific. You choose a specific market, or and I'm going to tell you my story in a little bit here, but you figure out ways to become number one in whatever area you want to go in. So now, let me talk about some things you could do to improve yourself and get a better position in your market. You can practice more, get more experience, win a contest, get on a TV show, a newspaper story, travel more, read more, create new material, change your outward appearance, move to another location. And some of the people that I coach and trying to make a living at this, I sometimes have to tell them, you may be better off to move to another city, depending on where you live. Now, when I first started, I grew up in the cornfields of Indiana. I mean, I'm talking like an hour way out of north of Indianapolis. And I eventually had to move to Indianapolis to work that market. And that's what I did. And well, the first thing I did, let me tell you the first thing I did, I bought a phone number at the time that was an Indianapolis number that rang to my house outside of Indianapolis, the hour away. So that was the first thing I did. That was a smart move on my part. So I really didn't live in Indianapolis, but people called that number thinking that that's where I lived. Nowadays, that doesn't matter with the cell phones the way they are. So the point is do whatever you have to do to position you, but mostly stop fooling yourself and start working on your own mind. And ask yourself, why is it I don't see myself in the number one position? There may be a legitimate reason why. And you need to be able to voice that and be able to write it on paper and address it so that you can change that, so you can actually be comfortable with it first and then be able to make the changes that you want to make. So there are basically 3 areas that are really going to change that position in your mind, and that is your personal growth, your show material and the services you give, and your marketing. So these 3 areas are critical. And notice I said it started off with personal growth. I'm a firm believer in being able to do your own self-improvement, personal development. That means you have to actually not just learn magic, but learn the business of dealing with people, learn the business of show business. That's why it's called show business. Constantly consuming information so that you can better yourself. Now, the best way to do that is to do what they call self-discovery. Now, in the lecture notes, I have a link to what was called Wizards of Wisdom, which is no longer there. It's an old website I used to have. But I will tell you that if you want to do some self-discovery, and I am a big promoter of self-discovery, find out, well, go online. Just go online and do some things on self-discovery. There are personality assessments you can use. I'm going to give you 2 that I predominantly use every time I coach someone. The first one is called the VAC system, which is visual, auditory, kinesthetic. You're either consuming or communicating with your eyes, your ears, or through your mouth, or your feelings, the way you feel, how you make people feel, the kinesthetic. Now, I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but one of those is probably your dominant, and you need to know which one it is. And the reason why is because you learn how to communicate with people using one of those 3 dominants. And it's important to know which one is yours so that you can sometimes adjust. Now, the next thing, I used to teach Myers-Briggs, the DISC program, as part of a self-discovery personality, but the one I use today is called the Enneagram, Enneagram. AGRAM. It means 9 points. There are basically 9 points of personalities. And I can tell you, I've never seen a program so powerful as this one. And it is available to you online. I even have a website called EnneagramSecrets.com. I'm not going to spend more time on that, but I'm going to tell you, if you find yourself hitting the wall, an obstacle about understanding who you are and why it is you're not successful, I encourage you to do some self-discovery and personal development. So if you can't be number one, you're going to specialize, and you're going to find out, maybe at one time I specialized in birthday parties. Another time I started specializing in doing in comedy clubs. I wasn't quite as successful at the time. Another time I became a bar magician or a restaurant magician. And then another time, eventually I got my career to the point where I became a trade show magician, which is tough work, a lot of tough work. And it's not easy to do. And I'm going to tell you, if we got time at the end of the talk here, how I broke into the trade show business. The most important thing is to be persistent and do it with integrity. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your people. When you tell them you're going to give them a good show, give them a good show. And depending on what you're charging and what they're willing to pay, you communicate to them what they're going to get. And then sometimes you go the extra mile because you want to make an impression. So I talked a little bit already about improving your thinking. I recommend an old book that's been around for many years. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That book really helped me in the early years. I used the principle in that book. That book at one time had made more self-made millionaires than the other book. So you can now buy it online for like $1 or $2. You can even download a PDF file for free, I think, if you look around. So we're going to position ourselves in the mind of other people's. We're going to work to expose ourselves. And now I'm going to share with you a little bit about my story. When I first came to Indianapolis, Indiana, and I was not the number one magician, but I was doing my best to give the shows that I gave and create a reputation for myself. But here's what happened. I got an invitation to perform, to audition as a performer at the Indianapolis Union train station. Now, this was a brand new festival marketplace where it was like a mall, except they had games and rides, and it was a tourist attraction is what it was. In fact, it became the number one tourist attraction within the several years I was there. I auditioned and got the position as the resident magician, and I worked my ass off, let me tell you, because what we had to do is we basically were there to be an atmosphere entertainer, like a street performer inside the mall. So we would pick our locations and we would set up our little performance area, and then we would have to draw a crowd in. And when I first started, I was only getting $8 an hour. They paid for my parking and then whatever I could get in the tips in my hat. So we were allowed to throw the hat out and do the pitch. Now, my hats were not the biggest hats at first. I knew the money I was taking in. Some of the other entertainers did very well. The juggler, the balloon artist, and so forth, they would sometimes pull down $100, $200 a day. And I had to struggle at first. But after 3 years of working that gig, and I was working maybe 4 or 5 shows a day, sometimes 5 to 6 days a week, I actually began to get really good. And it was my training area. Everybody needs somewhere to train and get stage time and to learn how to be a better magician. Well, shortly after that, I got hired by the Indianapolis Zoo, and they paid me a lot more for that summer. And then that's when Illusions started, and I was asked to be on staff there. And Illusions quickly became a very popular restaurant bar, and it was on the north side of Indianapolis in Carmel, Indiana, and it was well known for its not only good food, but its performance. So that really helped me. The next thing that happened was I was performing at the Indianapolis State Fair, Indiana State Fair, and a TV station saw me there, and they asked me to be on the show. They had a live performance on the show. And when they saw me, I started talking to them, and they started talking to me. And next thing you know, within a few months, I had my own TV show. Yeah. And they paid me, believe it or not, they paid me. Now, I was lucky enough to work with some other friends of mine, and we had a full year of TV shows. That's 48 shows that we did, and we were doing a little bit of magic between cartoons, and our show actually became the #1 viewed show during that time slot. And so needless to say, that really positioned me into the market. And that's when I became, I would say, the #1 magician, particularly doing birthday parties. And I was able to charge a fair fee for mine. And I have numerous stories I could tell you. I will just tell you this. I got up to the point where I was probably making, if I was getting ready to tell you how much money I was making, yeah, I'll go ahead and tell you. I was probably doing about 4 or 5 birthday parties a week. And at this point, my income when I first started off, before I started working at Union Station, I was only making about $35,000 a year. And then it bumped up to 40,000. And then it bumped up to 60,000. And that's when the TV show and all that started taking place and working at Illusions. Now, I will have to tell you, when I jumped from 40,000 to 60,000, the IRS contacted me and they audited me and they wanted to figure out how I was making my money and what I was doing with it. Needless to say, I was honest and I came up clean. I didn't owe anything. But it wasn't too long after that that I started doing higher paying gigs. And I actually bumped myself up to about $80,000 a year using this strategy. Okay. So you notice how I have slowly positioned myself to get, so as I'm telling you my story, I want you to be thinking about what is it you can be doing in your market, in your demographics, in the city you live in. How can you, maybe there's a regional mall or an outdoor mall or a theme park or a water park or a resort or hotels or just a restaurant. You start off with a restaurant. One of my first restaurants was a pizza joint, doing magic at a pizza joint. I don't know how much money I made. It wasn't very much, but I think maybe $25 or 80, maybe $80. I don't remember. I had a free pizza, So, and then, and restaurants are a great place to stay in touch with your magic, stay in touch with the people. You got a weekly gig going. One time I had 5 restaurants I was working, and most of them were family style restaurants. And obviously, I got a lot of birthday party gigs out of that. So in my notes here, I do talk about things you can do to kind of make yourself special. Now, I'm 6'5". I used to be 6'7", but as I've gotten older, my arches fell and gravity kind of pulls you down. So I'm not as tall, but I'm still a big guy. And and my voice is rather distinct. So, and people appreciate. So I make sure to use my size. I look at myself more like Big Bird or Barney or some of the other large characters. So I'm a gentle giant. I don't come on real strong. I make everything fun. Now I want to be honest with you. When I first started off, I tried to be suave and debonair and wear the tuxedo, and I had the birds and the candles and canes, and I wasn't doing comedy. But people started laughing at during my show, and I'm going, what are they laughing at? And then I watched a video of myself one day, and I noticed I was being funny. So I said, wait a second, this is part of that self-discovery thing I was talking about. Maybe I should be doing comedy and not trying to do this serious magic to music and all that. Dropped all that stuff, ended up getting rid of the birds and the rabbit. Well, I kept a rabbit for a little while. But everything went to strictly to doing comedy magic. And boy, that's when my career took off. That was the time when I was working at Union Station at the Festival Marketplace, when I realized that I could be doing comedy and people would enjoy my personality. So another thing I did, and I'm going to show you something. I wear glasses normally, but these are the pairs I wear when I perform. Now, I wear these because they're very distinct and bold, and they help me stand out, and they make me look funny in my sense. And then on top of that, I'll talk about sometimes I have trouble seeing with them, and I say, oh, it's something in my eye, and I rub my eye because there are no lenses in these glasses. But I use that in my promotional material. When you see a picture of me or when I'm performing, I'm usually wearing those thick rim glasses. Another thing I did was Steve Hart is not my real name. My real name is Hefner. It's a German name, and my father pronounced it Hefner, but quite often when people were introducing me, they couldn't pronounce it right. So my grandmother's maiden name was Hart. So I took the name Hart, Steve Hart, and I changed my name. So I positioned myself to be more of an entertainer, be more of a presenter. So these are things you might want to consider as you position yourself. Now, another major leap for me was I read a book by John Booth called Forging Ahead in Magic. I strongly encourage you to copy that book and read it. Now, it's an old book. John just passed away a few years ago. But the book, he talks about something in there that I did. And that is, he talks about speaking for civic groups and doing their luncheons. Now, if you don't know, there are numerous luncheons every day in your area with business people. Maybe some type of civic club like the Kiwanis, now I'm drawing a blank for some of the names of them. Why am I drawing a blank? Anyway, if you do the research, you'll find that they're having these luncheons, and they're having a speaker at every lunch. And they invite business people to come in and share about some secret insight about their business. Now, so I've looked into this, and I found out that they were interested in me. Now, they didn't particularly want me to do a magic show, and I told them I wasn't going to do a magic show. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't do a few tricks. I did a few tricks at the very beginning because you only have about 20 minutes to talk to them. They come in, they get their lunch, they're eating. Sometimes they're eating while you're talking, which is not always the best scenario. But you get yourself in front of numerous business people, and you can do this every week. Have an appointment and do it. So let me just tell you a quick story about one of the things I do. So I talk about my business, about how I got involved in magic and what it's done for me and the opportunities it's given me. Of course, at the time, I was also doing school programs, and I was doing motivational programs back then. And people took an interest in that. I had one gentleman who took an interest in me, and he says, I want to hire you to do some schools. I'll pay you, I'll set it up. And that's exactly what he did. He took me into some schools that were not the better schools, but schools he felt like needed a program like I was offering. And I would go in and I would perform the show, and he paid me out of his pocket. And that was all the result of me doing these luncheons. Now, another secret about doing these luncheons, some people say, well, you can pass out your business cards, but I didn't want to pass out business card. I'll give them my business card, but I want their card. So I put a hat at the back door and asked them before they leave if they would leave me their business card. And I created a newsletter, and I would mail out to the newsletter and thank them for being able to give me their card and keep me in mind for future business or talks and so forth. Now, I did talk to you about speaking. And I did start to pursue motivational speaking. And this is not for everyone, but I found it was easy for me to communicate a message with my magic. And I had a lot of creative ideas, a lot of things I created. As you've heard mentioned, years ago, I came up with the Wiz Kote, the burnt shoe box trick. For if you've not seen it, you can go to my website, you'll see it. And then I came up with numerous other tricks throughout the years, the jumbo spelling bee board that you show blank, and the coal to diamond, and more recently the Botania that is a watering can that turns into a Botania that Tor's been making. There are numerous things. I have numerous more products I want to create. Finding people to make this stuff is not always easy. But the point is I learned to be creative, and I have a whole program on creating new ideas. If you're interested in that, it's available on my website. And by the way, I guess I'm assuming my website is, you know what it is because it's in my lecture notes, the workbook here that I got. It's magic2motivate.com, magic, the number 2motivate.com. So if you go there, oh, and also, by the way, if you go to the page and give me your email address, I send you a link to a talk I gave several years ago at a magic conference on the super you, being you. And I talk about a lot of information behind how you can be successful as an entertainer. Now, I'm going to talk just briefly about a book I got from a guy named Seth Godin. This is back when I first wrote this thing. And his philosophy is you meet people who are strangers and you turn them into friends. And people are attracted to you because you're a magician, you're a fun kind of guy. And you create friendships, and then out of that, you create customers. So you basically get permission to promote yourself. That's what I did with these business cards I collected for these luncheons. I put them on my mailing list and turn them into some people who really enjoyed what it is I had to say and do, and then I asked to promote myself to them, and actually send them my promotional material, get them to go look at my videos. In the early years, I actually had a portfolio. I mean, it was this thick. I mean, I had about like 20 pages in it of a flipped thing. And it had everything from well, back then we didn't have video easily available. It was all VHS, and so I would go into the office and just do cold calling. I would go to the major businesses and say, "Who is it that books your events, your banquets, for your employee banquets or your company picnic?" Excuse me. Sorry, I coughed in my hand. Anyway, and I actually used this portfolio to go in, and you'd be surprised the number of bookings I got doing it that way. But obviously today you can still do that, and people still do make cold calls. But with the technology of the internet today, and there are better ways to position yourself. But hey, I was hungry when I first started off. Like I said, I wasn't making that much money. Now, another book I want to recommend to you. Oh, by the way, yeah, you can get Seth Godin's book. It's called. Yep, hang on here. I just had it right here. Oh, that's what it's called, Permission Marketing. Okay, the next book I want to mention to you is going to be a little hard to find. I think it's now out of print, but you still be able to get a used copy, and it's called Mischief Marketing. What's that? Let me tell you, Ray Simon wrote this book years ago, and I actually contacted Ray and talked with him and developed a friendship with him, only to find out shortly after that he ended up passing away. That's why the book is no longer available. The website is no longer there, Mischief Marketing. But you can type in Mischief Marketing and find used copies. And if you can get a copy, I encourage you to do so, because the information in that book works. Now, you may say, what does this mean, mischief marketing? Basically what it is you become a little mischief about what you say about yourself and who you are and what you do, to gain attention, to create a hook, to make you stand out. And if people question you whether or not what you say is really true or not, you basically have a way of explaining, well, it wasn't quite that way. For example, at one point, I decided I had performed over 1,000 birthday parties. So basically what I did was I basically looked the number of years I was performing magic, how many birthday parties I had been doing. I basically come up with a figure, what I figured that was true, and at least, but I had no way of actually proving it. I had not kept records, during all those years. And so I wrote a press release and sent it out to the newspapers and the radio stations or wherever, and said, I've performed over 1,000 birthday parties, and boy, do I have stories to tell. And I basically got their interest, And whether or not I'd actually, if they said, did you really perform 1,000 birthday party? I said, well, as far as I know, I've done this long enough. Now, another example, that's one example. And I did get on some radio shows, believe it or not. Twice I got on the radio, and you'd be surprised what you could do on the radio. So I want to tell you another story, how I got into the trade show business. It was a little bit of mischief marketing, and not only did I get the idea from Ray Simon's book, but you all heard of Paul Diamond. Paul Diamond had a little bitty book. The title of the book was "It Takes Guts, Damn It," and in that book, he shares a secret that I used. I was relatively still new in magic, but I was determined that I was going to start getting some more corporate gigs and I wanted to break into the trade show business. So I cheated, and he tells you how to cheat. So there was a big convention in downtown Indianapolis. I had been working at Union Station. I still had my tuxedo on at the time, and so I wanted to go in and show somebody what I could do in a booth to draw a crowd in to the So what Paul Diamond says is, during the trade show, quite often people will spend like hundreds of dollars to be able to get admission to go into the show. It's true. You know, some of them are free, but some of them are, you know, the cost to get in is astronomical. But people, after they've been to the show, they're going to go home. They start leaving the trade show area, and they throw their badges into the trash or whatever, or they walk out the building. So he basically says, you know, stop and ask someone, are they leaving the show? Are they going to be coming back? And they say, no. Can I borrow your badge? Or go through the trash bin as they throw them into the trash. Take one out, put it on. You now got a badge to get into the trade show. Now, it's illegal, you know. I mean, if they stop you and say, is that really you? And they call you on it, you're going to have to confess and say, yep, I just wanted to get in, you know. So that's what happened. I got in, I walked around the whole trade show area, and I chose the booths that I wanted to work in, at least the ones I thought. And I picked one, and I asked this guy, I said, hey, I just got done performing over here at the Union Station. I said, can I do a little magic in your booth, see if we can draw some people in? He said, sure. So it didn't take long before I was drawing a good crowd. And after doing that for like an hour or two, you know, he says, can you come back tomorrow? I said, sure. And I said, I need two things. I said, you need to pay for my parking. You need to throw me a few bucks for my lunch. And I need a letter from you, a recommendation. That's all I asked for the first time. And I got exactly that. But that's all I needed. Not only that, but there were other vendors there who saw me work in his booth. He'd come up and ask for my business card. That's the secret about it. Once you get into the trade show business and people see you and they know that you're good, they'll start asking if you'd be available for their next trade show, wherever it may be. And now I'll be honest with you, I did not work thoroughly through trade shows. And the reason why is because they're long hours and you have to stand on your feet a lot. But it pays very well. I mean, we're talking $1,000 a day more, you know. In fact, when I didn't want to do it anymore because I didn't want to perform in trade shows, I kept raising my fees, and they kept paying me. And I finally said, I'm done. I did do one a few years ago in Orlando just to see if I could still do it. I had a blast. It was so much fun. Anyway, so those are a couple of the things of Mischief Marketing that I have done, and I encourage you to get the book. So positioning yourself in your mind, this is going to be the biggest challenge, because we all have these obstacles about why we can't do this or why we can't do that. We listen to other people, and we let everything out here determine who we are. I'm a big believer of looking inward. I believe everything that I need is within me. Now, that doesn't mean I don't educate myself. I don't open myself up to possibilities as you're sitting here listening to me. But I'm going to tell you, everything that I'm sharing with you and everything that's in this workbook will help you. But you'll notice that the questions I'm asking you to give yourself an answer. So write it down. So you have to go within and start asking yourself some real hard questions about your marketing and how it is you can position yourself in your market. Especially right now, everybody's struggling because we've all lost. I'm still working professionally. I don't work nearly as hard as I do. I don't nearly make the amount of money I used to make. But that's a choice. I've chosen not to. But I am doing everything that I enjoy doing. I pick up the shows and do the shows I enjoy. Right now, I'm my market is basically family shows and senior groups, so retirement centers. The pay's not great, but I have fun. They love me, and I'm going to keep doing it to the day I can no longer do it. And I still position myself in those markets in a roundabout way. I don't do it exactly the same way like I described in my story. And but there are opportunities for you because you're younger. I'm now 66 years old, and you're younger, and you got more maybe a greater imagination, greater opportunities for you. And I don't want you to let these obstacles in your mind keep you from getting the gigs that you want. Now, this business is not for everybody. Let's be honest. I mean, but those of us who do it professionally, we all started off, magic was our hobby. I started off when I was 10 years old. And within 4 years, I won a international stage contest with the Magical Use International. And if you all know who Dale Salwick was, Dale was there, and he now teaches Chavez out in California. I had no idea that what was coming. I just knew what was in my heart, and I pursued that. Another quick story is I've been invited to perform at the Magic Castle 5 times in the early 2000s, and I don't know how I got in. Somehow, somebody, some way, I was invited to perform there, and I never auditioned, never sent them a tape. So somehow, I just knew in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. Now, I knew that years before I got to actually perform there, and I was scared to death the first time I went there to perform at the castle because I knew very little about the California scene and all that. I knew a little bit, but not much. It turned out to be a wonderful experience. The numerous times I performed there, I never had a bad audience. And if you know anything about working the castle, you do a lot of shows in 1 week. It's work, more work than you probably can imagine. And it's exhausting too, I have to say. But it is so much fun. And all the magicians that show up, and I even got to lecture 1 year for all the magicians, and it was standing room only. I was so happy when I did my magic lecture there. And so now, would I go back? Well, yes, maybe not. It depends on the circumstances. I still can do the same show I did back then, and I still do some of that when I have a corporate gig or whatever. The main thing is follow your passions, and this has been my passion. And I assume that you all know whether or not how strong that passion is and the fire within you. Let me put it this way. I always said, if I never got paid to perform as a magician, I would still perform as a magician. It's just because it's part of me. It's who I am. And here in the midst of what we're happening right now in this crisis with the virus, and we're all out of work, it does me good to see the magicians performing online because we're on quarantine. And they said, well, I'm not going to stop performing. And they do magic online. Now, I've got a whole YouTube channel filled with all kinds of magic videos I've put out. And so you can go to magician Steve Hart YouTube channel and see a bunch of videos of me performing. And then you can go to my website, Magic to Motivate. There are several things I'm offering on there. I'm giving this to you for free. I used to charge for this. I used to charge for the video of the motivational talk on the Super U. So if you want to, it looks like they put up the download there for the lecture, for the workbook. I call this lecture note because it would start off as a lecture, and then it became a workbook. So now it's a workbook. So if you want to, I really encourage you to download this, and not just download it, but go through it, read it, fill out the questionnaires, look at some of the references I give you to take a look at, and then do that self-discovery stuff. It's already been mentioned, I'm a coach. I was certified as a life coach back in 2001, and I used to coach a lot of people. Now I coach very few. But basically what I do is I find people that I feel there's a win-win relationship with, and I don't charge a lot of money because I find out that people who really need coaching don't have a lot of money. I used to try to charge a lot of money. I used to get a lot of money, but I'm doing this because I'm planting seeds. And so if you feel like that I can help you in any way, and you have some questions for me, you can contact me directly, and see. I will just tell you this: my first coaching session, I don't ask for any money, any obligations. It is free, and it's basically to get to know each other. And I prefer to do coaching like on Facebook video chat or Skype or something like that. That's the way so some of the people I coach don't live anywhere near me. I never see them face to face. So that's available to you also. The main thing I'm trying to do here in this particular part of the program is to not make you a better magician, but make you a better business person, a better person at marketing yourself, so you can go out there and do what you love to do. I have, and I hope you are too. So that's basically all I have, unless you have some questions for me. Yeah, please, I'd be happy to answer some questions right here now that you've got me. So they're saying, if you have a question, put it up there. Let me see if some of the questions I've had in the past. Let me talk about this. Family. If you have family and you don't have their support, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very tough. I will have to say, I've had a family that has been supportive. My parents didn't understand me. I went to college. My parents told me, "Oh, you got to get a real job. You can't make a living being a magician," because they didn't know, and I went to college, got a degree. It had nothing to do with magic. And eventually I got into sales. And once I was in sales, that's when I jumped back into the magic. And it just like took right off. My career took right off. And I ended up making a lot more money. Now, let's see. First point of contact is important. Do you believe in email as sectoral point? Should phone call. This is but like cold calling. When you're sending an email or making a phone call or whatever. I'm not against, there is no one way of doing this. I believe in doing every different way that you can, but my strategy is to position myself in their mind. So when you email them, have you made them a friend yet? No, you probably haven't. So what you're pitching yourself before they're really interested. So my strategy of position marketing takes longer, and yet at the same time, I'd still do what you're suggesting to do. I mean, I did have an email list. I did make cold calls. Here's one thing I would tell you to do. Choose the customers or the clients you want to work for. You don't need a huge list. For example, let's say you want to work a restaurant doing magic. Don't send out something to all the restaurants. No. Pick 5 restaurants in your area that you want to work in, that you think would be a good fit for you. And then learn everything you can about that restaurant. Go there, have dinner, get to find out if they have a family night, find out who the manager is, find out if it's privately owned, if it's a chain restaurant. You find out all this information, and then you start talking to them, and then you come in. You may offer to do a demonstration for them. Let me tell you, gang, I had great experiences in the restaurant business. I met a lot of celebrities in the places I've worked at, and you'd be surprised how many magicians' issues have expanded their fan base. What do you recommend for magicians to expand their fan base? Well, if you're talking about fan base versus people who are going to hire you, those are two different things. You can have fans. I've had fans. The people who love to watch me perform or want to know where I'm doing or what I'm going and love to come see my shows. But you want to have a list of people or a particular market you're going after. Contact relationships with people that you're going to hire you. Showcasing is I believe in showcasing. Be careful what showcases you get involved in. But I have used various showcases throughout my career to position me. But the best showcase you can have is a good video of you performing in a live performance on YouTube that you can send to people. Not overproduced, one that's a live performance so they can actually hear the audience interacting with you. That's what sells. It's a subconsciously, they may not be aware of the fact, but when they see you performing live and they hear the audience's reaction in the video, that is one way to really position yourself in their mind. So now the question is, who do you send it to? And as I just said earlier, you send that link to that video to people who you've already made contact with, who may be interested in hiring you for an after banquet or an employee or a convention, or I used to do children's expos. I would still do them today. Like I say, I'm not pushing myself. I don't have the big show like I used to. I don't want to carry all that stuff around. I'm going to tell you that 90% of my shows are in a little catalog case. I carry it in. 90% of my shows are that way. What's your advice in gathering a crowd at a trade show? Oh, just work it. You start off with something simple. It's not really that hard. When they see somebody up front, I used to have one of those purse frames. And I would say, if somebody's lost this purse frame and we're trying to find out who the owner is, could this be your frame? Of course, they automatically know because it's just one of those half frames. And you open it up and say, you pull out a sponge ball or some money, whatever you want to pull out of it. And they automatically got their attention. You just say, well, and you just kind of work it. You work the crowd. I don't know how. I learned how to do that when I was working at Union Station as a street performer. I would start off with just 2 or 3 people. And I had a way of drawing people in. I remember I would draw a crowd and people would be standing away like 10 or 8 feet away. And I would say, okay, everybody take one giant step forward. And everybody would step forward. I say, you didn't say mother may I, go back. Of course, that may be outdated now because kids don't play that game. But the object was just to bring them in closer to you. And to and you just might want to say, you probably can't see this, but take one giant step forward, you'll be able to see it. And you open up your cards and you start doing it. I stand there sometimes, and I'm not one to do card flourishes, but sometimes I would. People, they get bored at some of these trade shows. So don't worry about drawing people in. Just figure out what you're going to do that the business people would enjoy. And if you can incorporate the product of the people you're working for into your routine, do so. They love that. The questions I would ask the people that hired me at the trade show is, who are you looking for? Who do you want me to really pitch to? Because some of them don't care about the common person going through. They want the decision makers. And sometimes the badges would tell you who is who, or sometimes the salespeople would know who they are. So you have to get to know the business. Any other questions? How do you break into 55? Oh boy, there's a tough one. How do you break into 55 and older communities? And most seem to only pay like $100. That is a tough one. And the reason why is because usually there's no one person that's in charge of the entertainment in these communities. And year after year, they end up changing. So what you do is you basically build a reputation, and you try to get the other communities to talk to other communities to recommend you. I just did one just recently, second year, and in fact, the first year they gave me a standing ovation. I was so pleased that they were happy with what I did. And this year I came back and I videotaped part of the show, and they recommend you to other ones. I did get paid a lot more than $100. You know, you're right. Some of them only want to pay that because they don't know what type of show you're going to give them. But you know, some of them are willing to pay $300, $500 a show. This particular one I just mentioned, I think they did it was like a fundraiser. They charged like $10 or $15 to get in, and they gave me a percentage of the. No, they took my pay out of that. I was paid a flat fee on that one. You can work a percentage, you know, for the 55 and older. You know, some of them are not willing to take a chance, you know, for you to get in to do a show for the first time. But once you get in and you build a reputation, you know, hey, you come back year after year, and of course, some of them die off or move on, you know. So, any other questions? No. What was my major in college? As I told you, my parents said, you can't make a living being a magician. How can you do that? They didn't know anybody. They didn't know any better. In fact, when I made 80,000 or more, I took my tax papers and showed my parents how much money I was making. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe me. But my dad worked at a factory in General Motors, and my mother was a nurse. And so I followed my mother's career, and I was working as an orderly in a hospital, and I went into the nursing program, and I became a nurse. But I knew before I even got out of school, it was not going to be for me. Now I was a good nurse. They loved me. They put me in the emergency room. The doctors loved me, but I was not happy. So what happened was I ended up leaving nursing and going into medical sales. It was really easy for me to make that leap. Once I got back into sales, like selling myself as a magician, now I was selling a product. I could find that I could use magic to get my foot in the door. And I quite often would do that. I would go in and was selling medical supplies, and I would use magic to entertain the people, the purchasers, the purchasing agents, and so forth. So, yeah, that was my career, and I've never looked back. Now, I did do a lot of programs for hospitals and medical groups because I would talk about the fact that I had a background as a nurse, and I did a program. One of my first motivational programs was on laughter therapy and the value of laughter, and so that was one of my Doyne Mickey, a guy named Doyne Mickey from Atlanta, I think, who's helped me to start with that program, and I did a lot of those. Yeah. So my nursing did help with that, but you know, I didn't stick with just doing medical. I ended up working predominantly in the insurance business for a lot of insurance companies, in trade shows, and in my motivational speaking. And I'm going to go ahead and just tell you guys, I went from $500 a show to $1,000 a show just doing my magic. Let me real quickly just tell you how I did that. Someone would have told me they were making $1,000 a show, and I'm going, there's no way my clients are going to pay $1,000. I'm struggling to get shows for $500 a show. Well, here again, that mental adjustment. I made that mental adjustment, and I decided, okay, I'm going to offer 2 shows, one for 500, one for 1,000. It was the same show. Now, sure, I made a few changes, but when I talked to them over the phone and pitched it, I just basically said, and they would ask, what's the difference? And I would come up with, different terminology of tricks I was doing and so forth. But it was basically the same show, and I couldn't believe I started getting paid $1,000 to do the same show I was doing for 500. So that's one of the things I did. Let's see, what was the other one I was going to tell you? Oh, and the same thing for speaking. At the time when I started doing motivational speaking back in early 2000, I was getting $5,000 for an hour to 2 hour program. And I would do a little bit of magic in it, but I also trained myself in this, as a motivational speaker, and I learned the secrets of doing that. I actually even created a program called Magic to Motivate Training, and it was an online program, and I still have bits and pieces of that available to you. In fact, right now I am compiling that all into a book right now, so I may be sharing that. But that industry has changed a lot, so yep. I think my time is up. That's what they're telling me. Any more questions, you can contact me directly. I'm available to. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being smart enough to be here for the position marketing, because I didn't get to teach you any magic tricks, even though I could, but that's another day. Blessings to you.